presenting a waterfront resilience plan for our studio. We are Cartagena, Colombia, and our plan is called Cartagena 2040, rethinking the role of tourism in a dynamic and growing city. I'm Lauren. I'm going to start you off with an introduction to the region, as well as the existing conditions of the city today. Esther's then going to talk about the problem statement that was constructed from an analysis of these existing conditions, as well as the vision, the goals needed to be achieved to meet that vision, and the overall general framework plans. And then Alyssa and Amy will break down different districts and site plans to demonstrate various protective measures and other interventions to create a resilient Cartagena. And so we will get started. Colombia is located in the northwestern portion of South America. It is directly adjacent to Central America by way of Panama. Cartagena, specifically, is located on the Caribbean Sea on the northwestern coast of Colombia. It covers approximately 220 square miles and is the fifth largest city in the country with a population of 900,000 people, making up 2% of the entire country's population. Here we can see the urbanized areas of the regions that directly surround Cartagena. In recent years, Colombian cities have seen a lot of growth, mainly moving inland as well as along the coastline. Cartagena specifically has seen this growth in tourism, moving north along the coast towards Barranquilla and Santa Marta, while our plan is seeking to concentrate development closer to the city and bring tourism back down the coast and really move closer to that historic core. Cartagena was designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1984. It is a vibrant coastal city and a popular tourist destination. And it is one of the last remaining walled cities. Recent growth is indicative of future population growth as well, and the data projects that there will be a population of approximately 1.5 million people by the year 2040. This map is in here just to kind of orient you to the region, and it points out different districts that will be referenced frequently throughout our plan. I would like to specifically point out that Cienega de la Virgen, this white area there, is actually a shallow lagoon that's home to many important ecosystems and mangroves. A large portion of the city is made up of residential land uses, many of which are concentrated farther away from the main tourism regions of Boca Grande and Centro here. And these areas tend to be major job generators as they have a lot of tourism-related activities in them. The city also has some important institutional uses. In particular, we would like to point out the airport and the Navy base, as these will be locations referenced throughout our plan. The airport specifically is located directly adjacent to residential land uses, providing no barrier between substantially different types of uses. And the Navy of Cartagena currently has been discussing moving their Navy base to a new location in the city, potentially opening up this land for development. The mixed-use areas mainly define the port and industrial regions of the city. There are, however, new industrial office parks. It's the designation as mixed-use. The ports referenced here, as well as the petrochemical industry, are called out to show that they are important economic drivers in the city. The city also has an abundance of green space and important ecosystems, including mangroves, some of which are legally protected. It also has a parks, open space, and landscaped waterway system throughout the central city, providing a good base for public recreation as well as tourism-related activities. These final purple areas represent regions that are labeled as rural, suburban, and expansion areas. We saw earlier that many Colombian cities, including Cartagena, are starting to move inland as well as along the coastline. And once again, our plan seeks to concentrate development closer to the center to create a dense core, and hoping to preserve these areas for the agricultural and farm uses that are there now. The port economy is a major economic driver of the city. This has been, its location on the coast has historically made it a good import and export location. That trend still continues today. Many public and private ports line the city's southern coast. The city is home to the second largest port in Colombia, and ports have seen recent growth, and the port activities have increased by 47% in the last decade. The ports now are currently planning for more expansion, mainly due to the expansion of the Panama Canal. The petrochemical industry contributes 75% of the city's gross domestic product, as well as 88% of the industrial value. While the ports and industrial economies are very important to the city, tourism is also a very large factor in this. Cartagena is the second most popular tourist destination for international tourists in the Caribbean region, and between 2004 and 2009, the city saw the number of international tourists double between that time. Here we can see a breakdown of occupation by percentage of industry, and while we've discussed the ports and the manufacturing industry as being major financially big ticket items for the city, it is important to note that the tourism economies provide jobs for a large portion of the residents of Cartagena, making it a very important industry for the population. While the city has a robust economic and tourism industry, it is still plagued by a dysfunctional transit system. The current public transit system consists of poorly regulated and unplanned bus system, as well as unstandardized taxi services and informal moto taxis. This has caused the city to be primarily auto-centric, and people often rely on private cars to have more reliable transportation opportunities. The city is, however, in the process of implementing a BRT system called Transcaribe that is supposed to launch this month. We will see. This system will provide 3 trunk routes as well as a comprehensive system of feeder routes, and the city hopes that this system will appeal to all strata, increase tourist ridership and usage, and provide the general public with a more reliable system. Transcaribe also proposes a waterway system that utilizes the existing canals for water taxis. This transit system as a whole is important to the city, as it will provide more reliable transportation opportunities for both the general public and tourists to access different parts of the city. Here we can see the population density of the city. We would like to point out the high density areas on La Boquilla, as well as Cienega de la Virgen, and the new neighborhood called Boston, just east of the Cienega de la Virgen. And note again that they are located farther away from the tourist areas of Boca Grande and El Centro, making them difficult for residents to travel to by public transit. 70% of these dense areas are informal housing. It's not a surprise that this informal housing, due to the fact that Cartagena has the 3rd highest percentage of population living below the poverty line, as well as the 2nd highest percentage of people living in extreme poverty in the entirety of Colombia. The city has a large amount of vital ecosystems, including over 14,000 acres of mangroves, and just under 2,000 of these are legally protected. Mangroves are important to the ecosystem because they provide a natural barrier as well as habitats for fish and birds unique to the area, protect the shoreline from erosion, as well as improve air and water quality in the city. Though these areas are protected and clearly very important, they are experiencing pressures from the informal settlements that are starting to move into their area, ultimately and leading to the decline of the environment. It's common practice for these settlements to infill the wetlands with trash and other debris in order to create a more solid base for informal housing structures, and this degrades the land and ultimately hurts the environmental quality of the city. These two areas specifically, in La Boquilla to the north and Cienega de la Virgen to the south, are experiencing pressures from these informal settlements. In addition to the other problems associated with the deterioration of the mangroves, the erosion problem is getting larger as the mangroves are starting to deteriorate, and sometimes the beaches can lose up to 10 feet per year, and 100% of the beaches, which are vital to the city's tourism industry, are at risk of erosion. The city has drafted their own climate change adaptation plan called Plan 4C. This plan projects sea level rise to 0.65 feet by year 2040. This year is the primary motivation behind our plan, and we recommend that our protective measures and other interventions be implemented by 2040 in order to help create a more resilient Cartagena. The sea level rise will affect 70% of mangroves, 27% of the population, 28% of the industry, including the airport and Navy base that we discussed earlier, as well as 35% of road infrastructure. An analysis of these existing conditions show that the social, economic, and infrastructure systems of Cartagena are vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and Esther will discuss the problem statement, vision, and goals that resulted from this analysis.
So as we've learned, the Cartagena is a picturesque coastal Caribbean city. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which boasts a colonial city center, beaches, diverse ecosystems, and offshore islands. This unique location attracts over 300,000 tourists annually and generates the majority of the city's employment. So though the tourism sector is currently thriving, it is at risk from the projected effects of climate change, as well as pollution, habitat degradation, congestion, lack of access, and unequal social and economic structure. So we looked at these the existing conditions, our problem statement, and we formulated a vision for what we want to see Cartagena to be in the future. So we envision a resilient and climate-prepared Cartagena with equitable housing, secure infrastructure, an efficient transit system, a robust and diverse tourism economy, and protected and nourished ecosystems and beaches. So this vision statement and problem statement has helped us form these 7 goals, which have guided our plan as we move forward to try to develop a resilient Cartagena. So our first goal is to protect the existing infrastructure from sea level rise. Secondly, we would like to ensure equal access to employment opportunities within the city. We would like to encourage mixed use and mixed income housing, as well as create a formalized and consistent multimodal transit system. And protect and maintain the important ecosystems like mangroves that we just heard about. We would also like to diversify the locations and attractions of the tourism economy so they're not so centralized in the historic core and along the beaches, as well as improve the environmental stewardship and discourage inappropriate use of marine resources to protect these vital ecosystems within the city. So these, the frameworks are our guide to creating this plan to bring a resilient Cartagena into the 21st century. So we have 4 frameworks which kind of act as the lenses for this plan. These are economy, protection, development, and connection. So our economy framework seeks to diversify and grow the tourism economy. This is going to build upon the strongholds of the current tourism economy, which is the cultural heritage, the beaches and resorts, while also trying to build up an ecotourism sector within this tourism industry. So an ecotourism focus will allow the marginalized populations within Cartagena to have a larger stake in the tourism economy, because a lot of these strategies that we're proposing do not require large infrastructure investments. Additionally, much of the ecotourism is going to be kind of interacting and adjacent to the vital ecosystems that we've been speaking about. And so this kind of creates an economic value for these areas, providing an incentive for more protection and preservation going forward. So while we acknowledge that the port and industrial area is very important to the city, it's a huge economic boon to the region, it does not provide the majority of the residents' employment options. So we've chosen to focus on the tourism sector as we move forward with our plan. So it's really important for us to protect the city from the rising seas. This is one of our priorities. So our protective measures are varied, and they move along the coast. So as they move along, they try to integrate into the varied ecologies and typologies that exist along the coastline of the different waterfronts that we see throughout Cartagena. So in the northern area here, there we go. Okay, so the northern area, La Boquilla. This is the area that we saw houses a lot of the mangrove forests and informal settlements. So we like to propose kind of a greener, more eco-friendly adaptation approach in this area, such as oyster reefs, beach restoration, and a berm, as well as a pumping system to help maintain the connection between the Ciénaga and the ocean, so there's still this exchange of sediment and water. We hope that this approach will help to integrate with the existing ecologies in the area, as well as support the local fishing industry, and kind of grow the ecotourism value in the area to help provide opportunities for those that are living in the informal settlements in this region. So as our protective measures move down the coast, they become a little bit harder and more defined. So we have seawalls and flood walls that line the edge here. A portion of these walls are integrated with a tunnel system. So as we heard earlier, there's a proposed BRT system that's coming in. Cartagena is also currently building a tunnel. So we propose expanding this tunnel a little bit farther around Centro to protect the historic core. So the tunnel is higher and will protect as a seawall. And the rest of mainland Cartagena is a mixture of elevated land, beach restoration, and dams and locks. So the dams and locks are designed to protect the different mouths of the Ciénaga from the sea level rise, keeping this body of water from flooding, and thereby protecting the populations that live along the coast. And then Tierra, this large island down here to the south of Boca Grande, this is mostly virgin land, and it does actually have some significant elevation. Currently, most of the informal settlements that exist here are along the coastline, so our main strategy is just kind of an inward retreat to protect these areas because there is space for it. So our development framework really focuses on these protected areas and connecting to existing and new transit lines that we're going to propose. So two of the main tenets of our development framework are the northward movement of the airport and the transition of the Navy base that's currently on Boca Grande here, which is a hub of tourism, to Tierra. So this proposal is currently proposed by the city to move the naval base. So it hasn't happened yet, but it's potentially in the works. Moving this would free up some land on Boca Grande, which with our adaptive and protective measures will be of higher economic value. So the airport that we see up here is really feeling a lot of pressure from the growing international tourism industry, but it can't really expand because it's in between a body of water and very high density residential development. So moving this airport northward will give it space to grow, as well as opening a very large swath of land within the city limits for potential residential development, which is greatly needed because of the lack of housing in the area. So this large salmon colored space you can see up in the north, this is Serena Del Mar. This is a planned community development that's currently under construction. It's privately owned land, so the city is not developing it, but it's going to be happening. It's going to be completed in the coming years. This is going to be the home to the new airport, so that's one of the things that we're proposing. So these two salmon-colored areas are developments that are not directly related to adaptation as part of a development plan, where in contrast, the yellow areas here are areas that are receiving significant infrastructure investment or development as a direct result of adaptation proposals that we're going to be proposing in our plan for Cartagena. So finally, in our connection framework, we'd really like to provide access within Cartagena for the population here to access the job opportunities within the tourism industry, as well as provide a more inviting and coherent transit experience for tourists. So right now it's very difficult to navigate, it's not really mapped out, it's kind of an informal bus system, and that really limits tourists from being able to travel throughout the city. So with a more coherent system, it would give opportunities for tourist destinations to be located throughout the city and not so concentrated right in that historic core and the high-rise hotels development that we see there. So our approach is a multimodal transit system that includes an extension of the BRT system that Laura spoke about. So the BRT is currently under construction. It's supposed to be finished this month. We're proposing an extension of this BRT that moves north. So moving north from the historic core, we'll move up through La Boquilla, this includes a very significant TOD stop at the former airport location where we're proposing some development, as well as connecting to the La Boquilla neighborhood and the Serena Del Mar neighborhood, as well as the new location of the airport. In addition, we are proposing to implement the currently proposed water taxi system that the city has proposed. So we want to implement that and expand it so that these water taxis are moving throughout existing canals and dredged canals throughout the city. So this is going to be connecting the city as well as giving opportunities to connect to the new ecotourism destinations, both in the northern neighborhood of La Boquilla and on Tierra Bamba. So these goals, these frameworks are trying to meet our goals, and we have implemented some strategies, or we would like to implement some strategies to help us get there. So for the economy framework, we would like to streamline the restrictions and regulations process, create opportunities for trade, development, and to boost productivity. Within protection, we would like to allow tax exemptions for investors in ecotourism services and hotel construction or refurbishment, as well as enforce a stormwater fee based on the amount of impervious surfaces per property. We would also like to establish a third-party company with private investors to develop and manage the airport redevelopment, as well as provide tax benefits, exemption, and abatements for private developers who allocate 10% or more of affordable housing units. And finally, we would also like to utilize a public-private partnership for implementing the BRT system, as well as utilize the public-private operation partnership to operate the water transit system that we're proposing. So all of our policies are going to work together with our frameworks to try to meet the goals that we have set for a resilient Cartagena. I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Ladies to talk about the implementation of our plan.
Okay, so just to reorient you again, these are 4 areas that we're going to be talking about throughout our plans. La Boquilla to the north, El Centro, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Boca Grande, and then the island of Tierra Bamba. So we broke up our plan to discuss today into 4 districts, the ones I just mentioned. And we did this because we have 4 frameworks for Cartagena, but like other Latin American cities such as Medellin and Bogota, they've been very successful with having these large networks such as transportation work as the guides for these small interventions. So with that, through those 4 district plans, we then have 6 site-specific designs. And these site-specific designs work as catalytic moments that are then connected through these larger networks to further expand their impact. And this is because for Cartagena, we see resilience in this city as having the framework and then being flexible for change. So as we take in the sea level rise into consideration, we also take into consideration the resiliency socially and how socially this fabric needs to be flexible to fit the culture. So first start with La Boquilla. La Boquilla is in the northern section of Cartagena. It's the last area of Cartagena before you move up to Barranquilla. As you can see here, in the northern section, highlighted in green, are the mangroves of this area. And then to the south, as Esther has presented, there's the existing airport that's nestled between the Ciénaga de la Virgen and the city of Crespo, which is this triangular neighborhood, and then the beach amenity on the northern side. So with the sea level rise for 2040, we see that that Cartagena was originally developed as a port city. Therefore, the development starts practically at sea level rise. So without any protective measures, most of La Boquilla is predicted to have some sort of flooding by 2040. So therefore, our first protective measures are through transportation and other stormwater infrastructure. So first I'll talk about the Crespo Tunnel again. So as of now, this area of the Crespo Tunnel is under construction. However, we're going to expand that to Centro, south, because this tunnel also works as a seawall because it is 2.2 meters above the existing land level. Therefore, it will protect the existing neighborhoods below, and it also starts to erode the divide of that 4-lane road between the neighborhoods and the beach and waterfront. Additionally, we will be bringing the BRT through, which acts as a weave through all of our implementations that really starts to tie all of these moves together. And to strengthen our site area plans, we have implemented 2 BRT stops, one where the existing airport is, and then one up on this vacant lot within the mangroves. So at first we'll look at the different kind of development strategies, ecotourism in the north and TOD in the south. So with ecotourism, we are looking into mangroves, ecoeducation, and beach nourishment strategies. So to zoom into the site plan, we've looked into aquaculture as an economy. So we really want to diversify economy, and this is not only an economy for local residents, but it also can be an attraction to tourists. There are already some informal aquaculture sprouting up within the mangroves. It's very detrimental to the mangroves, but we see that there is a demand and there is a trade for aquaculture in this area. Along with aquaculture, we also want to expand on education. Being in Cartagena, it's all about tourism, and there's tours of practically every bit of history in Cartagena. So here's where we would like to attract tourism to understand the fishing culture and the mangrove culture in Cartagena. So this area is supported by a BRT stop, which is right here. And that goes along the existing BRT that moves up north to Barranquilla. This area is also supported by water taxis. And to further take into consideration the mangroves and the informal settlements to the south of Cienega de la Virgen, we are building up the beach and bringing this berm to block that mouth. We'll be setting up areas to manage the water and make sure that we're not polluting the water and it's not doing more damage than it is good. But we are doing this as a flood protection measure for when sea level rises to protect those areas of informality, because there are many, but they are very vital to the social and economic structure of Cartagena. So a section of that area, we see that the oyster reefs, sorry, I forgot to mention the oyster reefs. The oyster reefs are a light infrastructure that will be established because this area is a low erosion control. There wasn't necessarily a need for a large flood wall. So the oyster reefs are established to allow for the extension and the building of the berm and protect this existing fabric, which this existing fabric gets to enjoy or benefit from the amenities of this canal system and also this BRT to have a direct route into Centro. And between those two amenities are also where we lie the aquaculture and this educational area. And to move to the southern part of La Boquilla, this is where we have our TOD development along with the tunnel development. So in this we see how the BRT station also now acts as the anchor again for development. We have proposed that with this airport development we would start to bring in typologies familiar to Cartagena, mixed use, high density, supported by high density residential and mid density residential, but also incorporating features such as community serving parks and spaces within the mangroves that can serve as a strong public realm along tying back into this canal system that then extends off this page. We see that these implementations are bordered by this rectangular frame. However, all of these implementations spread to other sectors of Cartagena and stitch as a whole, including the underground tunnel, which you can see here, which serves as an area for opportunity for high and mid-rise development. Also, a park system. We're hoping that starting to program this tunnel will start to erode that barrier between the existing fabric and the beach amenity. So here you can see the existing fabric and the relationship to the mid-rise and high-rise developments that are centered around this BRT network. And on section 2, we can see the underground tunnel, how it will start to work as the stormwater infrastructure for sea level rise and how it can start to support low density commercial and really start to liven up some of these beaches and program them. So our plan aims to be completed by 2040. So to do that, we are starting with projects such as the BRT, which is already in the pipeline. And then we will move to the building of the berm, the tidal inlets to measure the quality, and the beach and pier nourishment, then leading to more tourism factors such as aquaculture and education, and then ending with oyster reefs to allow them enough time to be well established before the critical year of 2040.
Okay, next we'll move to El Centro. This is the administrative and cultural heart of Cartagena. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The prominent historic walkable wall is located in El Centro. So as stated, this historic city and this UNESCO World Heritage Site is a huge economic generator for the city, especially in terms of tourism. But it currently lacks a relationship with the coastline, as you can see in the image, the wall on the right, and you can see the coastline along the left. There's a major roadway currently cutting right in between. But we see opportunities and assets around the area already. There are many formalized pedestrian plazas and pathways, as well as parks that exist along the waterfront, as well as some informal park spaces that have begun to pop up, as you can see in the image here, a soccer field emerged right outside the wall. So we feel that there's an opportunity to really start connecting these spaces together to form a cohesive identity along the coastline that, with public spaces that can really enhance the economy that already exists here. As shown earlier, of course, with the sea level rise projections, by 2040, the majority of this area will be flooded. So to protect this area and connect it to larger Cartagena, we're looking at several different measures. Primarily, a series of seawalls will be protecting El Centro. As mentioned before, we are proposing that the Crespo Tunnel will extend around Centro. This not only buries the current roadway that is forming a barrier between the historic wall and the coastline, but also, again, acts simultaneously as a seawall to protect the historic wall from sea level rise. The southern portion of Centro will primarily be a regular seawall that actually most of it there is already a small wall that exists. It would be more extending that to accommodate the rising sea level. And finally, we will put a lock in place at the mouth of the canal here to protect the edges of the canal going up, as well as the Cienega de Leper, as mentioned earlier. Finally, to connect the area, the BRT will go through El Centro, as well as a system of water taxis. Two different strategies we're focusing on in El Centro. First is creating this new waterfront interface between the historic wall and the seawall. And the second of which is creating a linear greenway park system that will ultimately all connect together to really start embracing the waterfront of Cartagena. So starting with this new waterfront interface, this is really about how you can connect the historic wall with the seawall and create a new public space system along the coastline. The seawall will function as a public promenade, mirroring the current historic wall that is a promenade as well. Pedestrian and public spaces will be focused in current areas that already have pedestrian and public spaces, as well as entrances to the walls. The formal park spaces will again be existing park spaces or emerging park spaces that exist. And in general, just connecting this area with greenery and creating a system that can also function dealing with stormwater management. And we were looking at several measures while studying different interfaces along the waterfront, including the Big U, which is an image here. So here is a plan of what this new interface could look like. You'll see the seawall promenade along the coastline that mirrors the historic wall. There's two formalized soccer fields, park spaces and pathways, plazas. Maybe there would be a small bar restaurant in this area, which again also mirrors the wall as those exist on top of the wall. And I want to point out the roadway here. As we buried the major roadway, this would be reduced to 2 lanes and serve as access road, as we still think access is important in the area. And it would be traffic homed and mirror the streets of Centro And this is a section showing how this system would all work, as the walkable seawall would have to be high enough to accommodate the tunnel and sea level rise, but low enough to not inhibit views from the historic wall. And naturally, because we have to build up along the coast, it will involve sloping down to the wall. So this will essentially, we know this will affect how stormwater will run. So we want to put in place a stormwater management kit that can help retain water and pump out water in storm events. And finally, the lock park plan really serves to connect all these public spaces that already exist around the lock and really celebrate the waterfront and the lock system. An example of this is in Ballard, Seattle. They incorporate the lock into their park system. You can walk across the lock. And that's something we're envisioning here. As well, even though Centro is primarily built up, there is one small vacant area here that we intend to develop. And here's a plan of what this may look like with the continuous park system along. There would be water taxi stops on either side of the lock, so they would not have to go through the lock. So this essentially becomes a little transit hub area with mixed-use development alongside it, and you can see the pedestrian walkways and park system. And these are just sections to showcase the elevation changes and how the lock would require different water levels. The higher water would be on one side, and obviously be protecting the canal area on the other side. Overall, Centro is really about creating this new interface with the waterfront, connecting public spaces up along, and encouraging an increased tourist economy. We would start with a lot of the protective measures to get those in place, and then build in public space systems as well as traffic calming once the tunnel has been completed.
So now moving to Boca Grande. Boca Grande is a built-out portion of Cartagena that is full of high-rise and mid-rise developments, with the existing Navy base in the top and the naval club in the bottom, and with an existing public space along the southern edge of Boca Grande and the beaches at the top. So with that, like other plans that you're seeing, Boca Grande is proposed to be completely flooded by 2040. So therefore, we are taking an approach with Boca Grande as a canal city. We have Fort Lauderdale as a precedent for this. And our first measure for protection would be to dredge the existing road networks, leaving 2 arterial roads for the BRT connection. And with that dredge material, we will then use that as a cut and fill process. As you can see these diagrams, this is how the development stands today. And with sea level rise, we're not just projecting to the 0.65 feet of 2040. We're also thinking about if we're going to do these measures, how that happens past 2040. So in 2100, sea level rise is projected to be 3 feet. So we took that as a bare minimum and proposed that with the fill from these canal dredging, that we would elevate the land and have to renovate these hotels where the fill would then cause the first floor to raise and potentially combined with the second floor. So each development would potentially lose a floor, but that is just an option versus reconstruction of these facilities. And so our 2 economic development strategies that we see within Boca Grande are, again, the Navy base and this area down at the southern tip of Boca Grande. We see these areas being good prototypes for the area. So really making Cartagena learn how to live with the water and not just fight against it. So with this, we are proposing with the BRT to be the catalyst for the mixed-use, high-res and mid-rise residential, and also while development is happening, include these public and open spaces to guide and foster tourism. So zooming into where the existing Navy base is, we now propose to have canals running through the area. Our BRT stop is up here in the northern area. These 2 western development areas will be served by will be served by vehicles. However, these 3 islands to the east will only be accessible by pedestrian bridges and water taxi systems. This will be a model that we hope to eventually be able to execute not only Boca Grande, but then other areas such as informal settlements that are in some of the most vulnerable areas of Cartagena. So with this, we also use similar typologies as you've seen up in La Boquilla, typologies that are familiar to Cartagena. And with this, we also took from precedents developing this parkway along the waterfront with things that not only serve as tourist attractions, but also neighborhood and local serving amenities such as fishing piers, park systems, flexible markets for retail and trade, and also a program pier for cultural events. So this section just shows how the different typology now that you'll have with these pedestrian piers bridging over. So with this, of course, the first thing that we would do with Boca Grande is the dredging of the canals and land elevation, followed by the housing and retail development.
And lastly, we'll end with Tierra Bomba, which is the island south of mainland Cartagena. The interesting thing about Tierra Bomba, as mentioned earlier, is it does have high ground in the area. It has important mangrove ecosystems. And I'd also like to point out 2 residential areas that are informal settlements. And another important point to make is that this is a tourist attraction as well, and a lot of tourists enjoy this area because it is much more remote than mainland Cartagena. And here are the projected sea level rise. You can see that most of the residential areas will be flooded. So to protect and connect Tierra Bomba, we're looking at a retreat and conservation strategy here. By retreat, I mean letting the coastline retreat to where sea level will rise to, and by conservation, we were talking about the important ecosystems and the mangroves in the area, and really focusing on conserving the landscape that exists here, as the area is not highly developed. And we will be connecting the area through a water taxi system and formalizing a road that is currently a dirt road. Our 2 strategies here are creating ecotourism in the area to serve as an economic engine, but also focus really on the landscape of the area, and then also focusing on these informal settlements and thinking about how we can provide opportunities for community resilience there. For ecotourism in the area, we'll have 3 main parts, one being focusing on the mangroves and similar to La Boquilla, forming a tourism network that focuses on those. Another would be these low-density bungalow-like resorts that provide a remote area for tourists to stay. And finally, some adventure tourism on high ground, which is low-impact activities such as zip lining. Here's a site plan of what these low-density bungalow resorts might look like. You can see the organic form, elevated pathways, and how they're integrated into the landscape. And a section of how the land elevation changes and its relationship with the coastline. And finally, thinking about informal settlements and providing opportunities for formalized housing in a mixed-use area for a commercial corridor that can also not only serve the residents, but also provide another economic opportunity where tourists can go to. So just to wrap up the timeline, we're really trying to connect Tierra Bomba to begin with and create this economy, and then eventually create opportunities for residential tourism.
So we presented these districts in 4 different districts. However, we do see this as a comprehensive plan for Cartagena. So here you see all of the different implementation timelines for the 4 areas. As you notice, the implementation and protection measures are seen as first priorities, then followed by the tourism and housing initiatives. We then ran all these initiatives across our 7 goals that we mentioned earlier to make sure that these goals were serving multiple purposes and were truly meeting the hopes and aspirations that we have for Cartagena. And then to measure the success of our plan, we looked back at the Plan 4C and the things that they saw as the biggest risks for Cartagena, and made sure we were taking into account all these different stakeholders within Cartagena by adding 20% value to the tourism revenue and 70,000 jobs through the diversification of tourism throughout all of Cartagena, protecting 80% of these coastal areas while adapting 20% of the existing infrastructure, increasing the formalized public transit ridership to 30%, and reducing all of the road accident rates by 1%, to protect 70% of these mangroves that are at risk from the sea level rise, and to increase the housing choice by 35%, and addressing equity through 30% affordable units for these low-income residents. Our plan then is intended to build off of Cartagena's incredible momentum and growth, and we hope to guide these local efforts and help the residents deal with these chronic and acute pressures that Cartagena is facing, and have these initiatives link the entire efforts of expanding and diversifying the economy and ecology of Cartagena.
We now have 10 minutes here, and then we got to go to the other, to the leads alley to finish.
I'll pick up. I have 3 comments. First of all, it's a very solid presentation. I learned a lot. I've never been to Cartagena. I feel like I learned a lot about it. I guess in terms of presentation, Esther, you have a lot of information that you presented at sort of the regional level, and I felt it was very solid information, but I never got a sense of the character of the places until you guys got to project areas. So I would have either liked to have some zooms or some images or some close-ups or other things like that, just so I had a sense of what I was looking at. I mean, I had a really sort of 3 mile up sense of it, but I didn't get that sense of the community. And so you guys are, basically your narrative is sea level rise has the potential to wipe this place out, and we've got to do something. I think it's your general impetus, but unless I have a sense of what's special about this place that I can understand, I won't buy into that narrative. I think you need to give us a sense of the imperative more than just a bunch of overlay maps. I guess I'm a little worried about your proposal, because resilience is in part about dealing with uncertainty in the future, and yet I feel like just looking at the proposal, you sort of put all your eggs in one basket, and that's that tunnel under the seawall or whatever it is, and I'm just a little worried that if we get the 100-year storm, the tunnel becomes a water main or a sewer main forever. And I'm not sure it's a bad idea, but it's all your eggs in one basket. I guess I hope you would experiment with some other ideas, particularly as you get up to that northern shore. Maybe thinking about retreating from there, depopulating there, putting some sort of porous causeway or something like that that allows the water to come into the swamp or whatever it is.
Now I'm worried, because I had the same observation. Now I'm really worried.
And managing it there, rather than just putting in what's going to be a big ditch for water in a big enough storm. So, maybe this tunnel has some ideas, but when you look at tunnels like this, if you look at the Big Dig in Boston, it's not against the ocean, it's in. So I'm not sure it's a bad idea, but I'm a little worried about it. And given that we're dealing with an uncertain world, and you need to have a fallback plan for that. I think my biggest problem, frankly, with the presentation is actually I'm just struck by how Cartagena is a city of seconds. It's the second biggest, second this, and that. That's not maybe a problem. Early on, you said that 60% of your population lived in informal settlements. And I didn't see any of your, so ultimately this flooding is presumably going to affect those people, and maybe you have a plan to deal with that, but I didn't see it. So I think you have to, if your population is mostly informal, and you said they're substantially at risk, you got to tell us what you're going to do for them.
Well, I can't be more in agreement with John, which again is extremely worrisome to me. But I thought
I'm going to change personalities on Monday.
I think that you gave us a very solid reading of the city, depicting the environmental, socio-economic conditions, opportunities, and challenges of the city, which led you to think differently in the way urbanism would play out. And that is in a way what I was lacking in the other presentation, that I think that you had to go more into the reading that you gave us. So thumbs up for the initial approach on the complexities of environment and the challenges of a city like this that, and certainly face vis-a-vis climate change. So I think that was very good. Taking on John's observation, The most concerning one for me was the data of the 75 to 80% informal areas. Because I think that they were never really mapped to understand, you know, we spoke about the densities and we saw that there were densities in the coast and they were almost equal to densities inside. But 3/4 of that urban surface was comprised by informal occupation, even if they were very high density. And a big chunk of that informal occupation, when you saw the map with the Ciénaga and you saw like some little lines projecting of them, it was clearly that 1/3 of the informal occupation is there because they stole, they landfilled with trash, with tires, with whatever should be found. They created land to occupy part of the Ciénaga. And that is why the mangroves that ring all the side disappear in the south. There used to be mangroves that are now occupied. So what I'm trying to say is that there's 75% or 80% of the population in the lower brackets cannot access the formal real estate market, no matter how affordable or how much subsidized they are, because the only asset that they have is building on land, and the land doesn't even exist. They have to create it, unless there's some mechanism that creates the land. So what I heard, well, we're taking away the airport. Maybe that's an opportunity. You know, we create land to make it accessible. We're creating the Navy base and we're taking out, just so happens that the next to the richest areas in the city. Or we have to see where these areas will expand without eating into the Ciénaga. So you have to address it because you presented the facts. And without that, the whole sustainability of the city goes down the drain. So please address that. Then, again, it's not only, you know, I think we started opening some things, that tourism is diversified not only in the beach, but it moves into the Ciénaga, into aquaculture, into the cultural activity in these barrios, you know, because they can be engaged if you do it smartly in the tourist industry, and that was in your statements. But since you did not play it out, almost all your moves were dealing with the rich area and the coast. And I think by investing in heavy infrastructure, besides the fact that the ditch floods at some point, is dragging all the mobility to where the rich people are on the coast, leaving the unassisted, without infrastructure, poor areas behind. And that's the drama. You can make a transit, and you have all the, like, Dubai towers on the coast, and as you move back, it starts going down in income and losing infrastructure until it becomes inaccessible and violent. So how do you reverse these things? So probably the idea of John of bringing the mobility systems that have to do not only with Cartagena, with all the urban system that runs along the coast, further in, may allow to work on a seam that connects two things and brings a little more equity. I don't know, that's...
Let me build on that just a little bit. And one of the things that I get upset about planning in general is that we don't recognize urgent situations when we see them because we're too comfortable. And the piece of data that really stuck in my eye was you're adding 700,000 people in the state for 25 years. Where the heck are you going to put them? I mean, you're almost doubling the size of the city in 25 years. Where are these people going to get the water? You know, if you're going to densify, you're going to be adding all this impervious surface. I don't care if you're trying to create a stormwater utility, but you're going to have stormwater problem, and also obviously you're going to have problems with central sewer. With more informal settlements, you're going to have more water pollution. You're going to end up there. And so this is one of the huge problems in the developing world is that they don't have the adequate infrastructure to support the population growth that they're looking at. And it's going to be one of the biggest problems that we're going to face with this urbanization that's going forward.
And the densification, sorry to jump, the densification, that's something that was very struck, also badly struck. The densification was always these towers with plinths and 20 stories, which tend to be for only 10% of the population that lives in the Dubai real estate thing. Because what makes the city so unique is Cartagena must be one of the most beautiful cities in the planet. I compare it to Prague, of the old city. And the barrios, if there are people that are lively, that are out in the street at 2 in the morning with salsa, even if they're violent, are the barrios. And the only stupid area of Cartagena are these towers. And that's the typology that I saw 100 times. So there has to be another way to engage with real estate and culture for that percentage that really accesses the real estate market. And then we have to think of somebody else, something else for the other guys.
I think that's the conundrum, and I think part of what made the presentation great for me was use of sections. I was so happy to see sections. I was so happy to see design
Landscape moves.
It was really very good. Also,
Yes.
it's the right approach to planning to sort of show concretely what things can happen. And then the question is, how do you make sure you have an overview on an urban or regional scale? And there, especially, for instance, one of the tricky things that you get is it really going to be possible to have perimeter protection for much of the area? Because it will have to be built slow, but because that's always the backflow. So that's really, I think, maybe you might want to even look at perimeter protection around the old city, where you can actually use the water on the other side of this park structure to create something there, and for the rest.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Dutch have basically decided to retreat from the coast rather than to reinforce the coast, right?
Yeah, and in the Netherlands we don't build on the coast. We have a dune system, and we like to keep it. Although we are starting to put program in like parking garages and stuff. We are sort of starting to be a bit more.
In fact, those walls would protect the city. That green belt that you have, I think it's beautiful, but let the waters move in, even when they hit the wall.
En Cartagena, the thing is like they keep on building the beach out. So instead of retreating, they keep building.
Well, retreating is hard, intellectually and ideologically, but you may be the place where selective retreat may be the.
I think we should be more precise about what it is that you're going to protect with perimeter protection. I like the fact that you're experimenting with just letting the water into certain areas and you explore what can happen. But I really think on a regional scale, if I hear you correctly, we need to zoom out, we need to explore retreat, we need to invest in transit in larger communities.
I'm way too waspy to be speaking 2 minutes after 5:30. I can't hardly even concentrate knowing that we're late, so.
They're not pushing us out yet.
Oh, cool, well, okay.
Just waiting for
You have another relative in Colombia?
I actually was, I think
Prettier than this Mumbai.
these are great comments. I think they hang together, and I think they build on the presentation, I mean, they really don't undermine it. They actually take what you laid out and kind of push you in a direction. And I think the logical conclusion of that is, what I was going to say before I heard all my colleagues speak was, you're not making enough of a case, given the facts you laid out, that the only generator for this place is the old city, is the tourism, right? It's where so much of it is, right? And so I think the logical conclusion of a lot of these comments is that, and you know, said it at the end, is that you protect one place and you strategically, in a managed way, retreat back from almost everything else, and you spread it a little too thin. You try to protect a lot of places, you try to keep a lot of places habitable and everything else, and I think actually the logic of your facts is that save the generator, and then manage, take the savings, and manage the retreat for a much broader population.
Or learn to live with water.
Or learn to live with water, which is the other Dutch Mumbai lesson, actually.
I just think something that's interesting is that your thing, the center, the place you want to protect, already has a wall. And when you put that section up there, I didn't understand how the tunnel worked until you showed the section, but then that was actually lower than the medieval wall. So here's this protective barrier that exists, and then obviously it's not complete and sealed, etc. But that's something that maybe is unique to this place that you could capitalize on as a feature. And one of the things you didn't mention in the beginning is that it's hinted at in the maps, but you're up against some serious topography here. And so retreat may not be as easy as it could be in other places. So you have to look at what's specific to this city that makes these conditions necessary. And I think just generally bringing everything you talked about together would help in terms of creating a more cohesive argument for what you're trying to do. Because you're doing the same things in different places, but I didn't see how it all worked together. So something to keep moving.
So my intention is for everyone to gather, bring their seats and gather over there to have a continued conversation, so if everyone's game for that.
Literally take this chair?
Oh yeah, that's the only way to do it. That's the only way to do it. Okay. Unless you have staff that's going to do it.
That didn't take long at all.